So, in continuing with this setup series, I wanted to talk about some things that I didn't talk about yesterday. First thing I wanted to talk about was board alignment and how to get that set up. Also, well, we'll start from there and then we'll see what we can figure out. So, first things first is if you notice when you're flying your wing, not in manual mode, but in horizon mode or angle mode, just to see if it flies straight, you might notice that the plane is dipping down a little bit and it's not staying true to horizon, or going up or going to the right or left, or a combination of all that stuff. So I want to show you how to fix that, and there's two ways. I'm only going to show you one way. The second way that I'm not going to show you is there are stick commands to do at the field. You can look that up on GitHub. It's kind of hard because you got to be able to see the light of your board, and then when you do that, you kind of don't know how. Every time it blinks, it's like a 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 kind of thing, and it gets a little bit hectic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the other way. And so first we're going to go into Inav, and you're going to notice again that every time you pull up Inav, if you pull up Inav and there, see I'm on 2.2.1, if there is a newer version available, 2.4.1 and so on, every time you open up Inav, it's going to actually go through the database and go, oh, there's a new firmware you can download or a new configurator you can download. Always hit close. So if I double click, you'll see what'll happen. Oh, there's a new configurator version. Who cares? I don't care. I want to run 2.2.1. A lot of people get confused. Oh, should I download it or not? The only way you need to download it is if you want to run a newer version of firmware on your board, because Inav, like I tell a lot of people, is like Betaflight, and Betaflight is like CleanFlight, and CleanFlight is like Baseflight, and Inav was forked off of Betaflight. That being said, Betaflight and CleanFlight and Baseflight all were built off of an open source. So when a lot of people put code in, they just kind of put it in and they fix patches and this and that. So every time there is something new added to Inav, which is a fork off of Betaflight, it breaks the GUI, or a lot of times it does. And is what they have to do is they have to fix the GUI. And that's why you have a different version. Like most versions will not run. If I have 2.4.1 GUI, I kind of can't run 2.2.1. You can, but there's some things in there that you cannot adjust or that have been fixed because of broken things in there. Not of Inav's fault, but of Betaflight and Baseflight and all of that stuff in the beginning, since the beginning of all this code that's been put on all these open source projects. So, again, make sure you're in USB modem. Connect. Let's see if I can raise the screen. It's already up. So, as what you'll notice right here is my wing, and my wing, it basically says this is actually flying good, and I've adjusted it, and so I'm not on a perfectly level surface right now because my wing does fly perfectly level in stabilized mode, depending on if I'm going with the wind or without the wind. So is what you want to do is when you fly, just like whenever you trim your plane, you trim it into the wind. You're going to get some nose drop when you're going with the wind, but that's another topic altogether. So you'll notice if I dip down, it goes into the positive, and if I go up, it goes into the negative. If I roll right, it goes to the positive. If I roll left, it goes to the negative. That's just like your stick commands. If you throttle up, it goes positive. If you roll right or yaw right, it goes positive. If you throttle down, it goes negative, so on and so forth. So is what you want to do is theoretically kind of eyeball where your plane flies good, and then you would say, okay, well, my plane flies good here. So your pitch is, let's get it to 1, -1. So your pitch is -1. So is what you would have to do is you would have to add 1 to that to get it to 0. So is what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to hold it. In 2.2.1, you go into the configuration, and you'll go into pitch degrees. Now, -3.2, I want to make it -2.2. So -2.2, save and reboot, and we'll see what it looks like. I'm still trying to hold it as good as I can. Now you go back to setup, and you look, and it's at -8. Let's see here. It's at -8. So let's go back here. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna prop it up, and I'm gonna put it back to where I think it should be. Let's see here. Well, let's just do this. It's at -3 or -1.3. So I'm gonna go back to -3.2. Where I know that it flies right, and I have something propped up underneath the wing. It's kind of trial by fire, this thing. There's no easy way to do it. So now it's at -2.2. So I'll go into it again. Now it's, if I wanted to make this 0, I would have to add 2.2 to the pitch. So I will do that, or 2.3. I'm going to add 2.2. So go back into the configuration. I'm going to add 2.2. So that's 2. If I add 2.2, that's going to be -1. So -1, save and reboot. I have to remember it's -3.2. So now when I do this, the pitch should be 0. And that's how you get it to fly level. You just add and subtract. So let me go back and make it -3.2 because I know that's where my wing flies great at. And obviously, you know, if you have any kind of a wing that it's off, then you would adjust that. Now, one other thing that I wanted to tell you about board alignment is, so you remember when we went back into the calibration and you see all these things are checked, in other words, it's calibrated. If you were going to run your board 90 degrees or 180 then yaw, in other words, you're going to make the back the front and the front the back. Is what you would do is you would do this calibration normally as the arrow is facing forward. You would calibrate it like you weren't going to change the orientation of your board. So do that completely correct into the way that you're not going to run it, if that makes sense. Do it to the way the arrow is facing forward. You do the first one. This one, you do it upside down, and then, you know, face the arrow that way. And then you would go into configuration, and you would go into the yaw degrees, and you would make it either 90 or 180 or 270 right here. That way, that makes all of your stability modes fly correctly whenever you change the orientation of your board. You always, when you calibrate it to the front in the correct way that the flight controller is supposed to be used, not the way you're going to use it. All right, so now that we got that, oh, there's another thing I wanted to talk about. Auto trim. So modes tab, and auto trim, which is servo auto trim right here. I have it on switch 9. Let me get my radio real fast. So here's my radio. I'm going to turn it on.
Welcome to OpenTX.
And there's something that you need to get in not in your head, but something that I think that you should do. Everything that I have on a switch has an audible. So
Engine on. Engine off. Loiter.
That's loiter mode.
Off. Return to launch. Off. Launch mode.
Launch mode. Off. Auto trim. Off. Modes tab.
Acro mode. Angle mode. Manual mode.
So manual mode, acro mode, angle mode, and then these are my rates.
Middle rates. Low rates. High rates.
All right, so whenever you go to auto trim, whenever you take off, do it in manual mode. If you don't do auto trim in manual mode, you're going to be fighting the stabilizer. So in other words, if you have it in angle mode, you take off and you want to, your plane's rolling, your plane's going up and to the left, and you need to go down and to the right to get it to fly stable. If you do that, you're not only fighting your board alignment and the stabilizer, but you're basically not going to be able to trim your wing that well. So always do it in manual mode.
Manual mode.
So what you do is when you take off, if you need to auto trim, you auto trim, and then you hold it to where your plane is going straight. Whether or not, wherever your stick is at, you have to maintain it going straight. As it's going straight, I'm going to do this for purposes that we can watch it easy. So all you have to do, hold it straight as the plane's flying.
Auto.
After 2.5 seconds, you'll notice that it auto trims. It does it every time, 2.5 seconds. You fly the rest of your flight, whether it be 2 minutes or 2 hours, with that auto trim switch on. Whenever you come in and land, you land. Oh, I got to be armed. You land and you disarm. When you disarm, that saves the auto trim setting. I go one step further and disarm, shut off the battery, and then make it to off. So that means the next time you plug in a battery, this is off, and it already saved. But if this is on, the next time you fly and you don't have an audible and you forget and you go to plug in, you go to arm,
Engine on.
your plane will not arm as long as this is in 2.0 and above. With auto trim selected, it will not arm, and you'll rack your brain. Why isn't it arming? Why isn't it arming? Look at your switches, find out what's down. That's why I have an audible for every one. Every one of these switches besides arm and the modes tab are all neutral. So I know this is manual. Everything else has to be in the neutral position or the off position in order for my plane to arm. All right. Let's see what else. So, those are the two main things that I really wanted to talk about. Let's see, ports tab, not ports tab, sorry. Fail-safe. Fail-safe's another big thing. This is really, a lot of people that were using Betaflight when I was flying mini quads, right when Betaflight was kind of getting going and all that, everybody was like, especially flying Crossfire is really, it makes it really good, but setting fail-safe. So to me, you can either do two things. Well, not to me, but you can really do two things. You can set fail-safe to no pulses, or you can set fail-safe to PS, which is position mode. So the way I set fail-safe up is I set it to a position, and the reason why I set it to a position is because if you set it to no pulses, but all of a sudden get a surge in your radio or something happens, no matter what, if for some reason something goes out, the radio is going to trigger the flight controller. The flight controller is then going to engage in return to home. Also, if you do that, but you have kind of a wonky radio and it fluctuates a little bit, sometimes that's actually why in this fail-safe position, in this fail-safe in here, that's why I set it to 980 or 950 and 215, which this is not set. This is set to 980 and 2115. I know that's probably confusing, but let me put this down and I'll show you inside my Crossfire. So with Crossfire being on, I probably won't be able to get to it because my RX is not on. But you would set it to position. You would set failsafe right here, and you would set it to POS position. And whenever you click that, it would get your sticks to wherever you want it to be fail-safed at. What I always do is I set return to launch on
Engine
and make sure it's armed. Then you go back to your radio and you set that fail-safe position. That way, if you ever lose connection of the crossfire, whether it's in here or inside your wing as it's flying, or your plane as it's flying, it knows to be on return to home and to be armed. If it's just on return to home and you have this off, it's going to disarm and your plane's going to fall out of the sky. So always have it armed, have return to home set, and do fail-safe position switch on your crossfire. Shut that off. I actually believe that's all for now, so quick and easy one. Hopefully that helps. If there's any more questions, please hit me up on YouTube or hit me up on the Right Wing Nation or the Drone Hangar group. Thanks.